Maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à...
Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 28 of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, the committee is meeting to pursue its study of obstacles to entrepreneurship among veterans. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Members can participate in person or via Zoom.
All in-person participants consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and the safety of all participants, including the interpreters. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and our members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, and I know there's a few of you this morning, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation. The floor, English or Français, French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pour les députés présents dans la salle, si vous souhaitez prendre la
For
parole.
members in the room, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. For members participating via Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The committee clerk and myself will do our best to maintain a correct speaking list, and thank you in advance for your patience and understanding.
First, I would like to say welcome back to our members. It's really pleasant to see you all. C'est un plaisir de vous revoir ce matin. I would like now to welcome also our first panel of witnesses. From Alberta Recoil Inc., Heather Vanderveer, owner. It's a pleasure, ma'am, to see you here. From Corporate for Life Apparel, Nicholas Strauser, founder by video conference. And from Vimy Forge, Duncan McSporporn, and I apologize for the last name, sir, managing director, also by video conference. So I want to say thank you all for joining us today. You will each have 5 minutes to give your opening remarks. We will then have a series of questions with the members of the committee. And for those that are online, please note that after 5 minutes, I will have to interrupt you. And throughout the questions, if the members extend their allocated time. Also, I am the gatekeeper of our clock, so I have to apologize in advance if I have to interrupt you. We'll try to stay within those time frames. I will now invite Corporate for Life, the Corporal for Life Apparel, Mr. Nicholas Strauser, founder, for his first 5 minutes.
Good day, bonjour. My name is Nick Strauser, and I'm the founder of Corporal for Life Apparel, a veteran-owned and operated apparel company out of Windsor, Ontario. Today, I will be speaking about the barriers that I have faced as a veteran entrepreneur. Those barriers are hiring, mentorship, and capital. I started this clothing brand as a way to show my pride in serving Canada. And since 2015, it has become a brand sold across Canada, the United States, and we've even shipped orders to Europe and Mexico. We've had 3 brick and mortar retail stores. Our brand is currently available in 2 national museums, 2 regimental kit shops, and 1 independent store in British Columbia. We collaborate on a line of craft spirits with a veteran-owned distillery. We sponsor fighters, race car drivers, and a youth hockey team. We've been able to donate tens of thousands of dollars to various veteran, first responder, and local charities with a portion of our sales. Just saying all this brings me great pride, and I still have big goals for this company that will be accomplished, but how much longer will it take? I started this company with no retail experience, no t-shirt design experience, no advertising or content creation experience, and most importantly, no money. I have self-funded this venture since day one, sometimes putting myself in financial peril just to keep the dream alive. I'm fortunate enough to be able to say that I've made it through some very tough times. I've hired and fired entire staffs more than once. I've used my personal paycheck from my own job to pay wages. I've used personal savings and credit to ensure my store's rent would be paid on time. It's never been a question of if this brand will be a huge success. It's always been when and how. Being a veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces has been a huge factor in the survival of this company. We've pivoted multiple times and even had to take a few steps back to see the full picture. but the brand has always moved forward. I cannot say this has been a self-built brand because I've had a lot of help along the way. Family and friends who have stepped up as sales staff, other successful entrepreneurs who I've met that have guided me when I had no clue what I was doing, or even being given a rent-free space to turn into a retail shop. I've been part of mastermind groups where I've paid fees to learn from and interact with business owners from across North America. I've also helped up-and-coming veteran entrepreneurs who have reached out seeking my advice, which is absolutely crazy to me, but it means I'm doing something right. While I can say the biggest barriers I have faced as a veteran entrepreneur are due to my own actions or failure to act, I can say it would have been nice to have learned what I've learned so far in a shorter time period. I'm going to talk about what I believe would have helped me and could help current and potential veteran entrepreneurs. Some of what I will discuss has been talked about by my colleagues Dave Morrow, as well as Greg Potapenko at earlier meetings. The first thing would be to let veterans know that entrepreneurship is a possible choice after service. If not to start their own business, then even to purchase an existing business where the owner is retiring or looking to sell. I've been asked more than once if I was interested in purchasing a veteran-owned business. I've declined, but there may have been a veteran out there who could have purchased an established brand. Hiring. As mentioned earlier, Corporate for Life at one point had 2 stores operating in 2 cities, 2 hours apart. Because I had no idea where to look for serving members, military reservists, or veterans looking for work, I used social media, and I was able to recruit 6 employees for my London store and 4 for my Windsor store. Finding staff for my last store in Oromocto was very hard. After a 3-month social media recruiting campaign, I ended up hiring the first and only 4 people that showed interest last minute. I'm currently facing a similar problem in trying to recruit staff for the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto this summer. I still don't know if there is a database for veterans in search of employment, so I've been reaching out to reserve regiments and social media pages to get the word out. A veteran-owned business job bank where veterans and reservists could find each other for employment would be an amazing tool for companies like mine. One of our goals at Corporate for Life is to have teams across the country that can act as ambassadors and sales staff for events where I cannot be, effectively giving us a national footprint aside from our online shop. The biggest issue since the beginning has been funding. I don't think Veterans Affairs should be funding veteran businesses. They have more important things to do. But I do believe if Veterans Affairs or the government partnered with national banks to offer veteran entrepreneurs low-interest funding or even grants, veteran businesses would grow faster and larger and could help smaller companies survive at least long enough to give it a go. Aside from using my own money and borrowing at extremely high predatory interest rates, I have never had an investor or even a business line of credit. As of now, 11 years into the business, we're finally debt-free and cash flow positive. At this point in the business, I feel like I've done pretty well, but looking back, I wonder if I could have had the same successes even earlier on with some help. For any veteran entering the business world, I believe their path could be much shorter and less painful if they had the things I did not have while building this brand. I believe if I had the mentor, the funding, and the ability to find staff, the company would be much bigger. We may still have stores, and we would be able to help many more veterans than we currently do. But again, I have learned a lot and become not only a better entrepreneur, but a better human being building this brand. In closing, if veteran entrepreneurs had access to mentorship, funding, and staffing, we could create an ecosystem of entrepreneurs that could create jobs and economic growth here at home and give purpose to those leaving the forces. Thank you for your time. Merci pour votre temps.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to have for 5 minutes from Vimy Forge, Mr. Duncan McSporran.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité à témoigner.
Thank you very much for having invited me this morning. For everyone's benefit, I will speak in English rather than putting my French to the test. My French is fairly limited to limited vocabulary.
My name is Duncan McSporran. I'm a veteran of 24 years service in the British Army, including time seconded to the United States Army and more recently here in Canada, where I spent 2.5 years at the Canadian Army Infantry School responsible for Phase 2 officer training and technical and leadership development of infantry non-commissioned officers. I'm a 4-time founder here in Canada since transitioning from my service at the infantry school at CFB Gagetown in 2012. Currently, I work at the intersection of innovation and entrepreneurship as a general partner at Tidal Venture Partners, and I am a founder of VimiForge. This is a national not-for-profit innovation accelerator for small and medium technology companies in the defense sector, which is based in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Although my current work is largely
I'm so sorry, we lost you for, just give me a quick second. You've been muted. You muted yourself. There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Currently, I work at the intersection of innovation and entrepreneurship as a general partner at Tidal Venture Partners. I'm a founder member of VimiForge. This is a national not-for-profit innovation accelerator for small and medium technology companies in the defense sector, which is based in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Although my current work is largely in defense and national security, my focus today is on veteran entrepreneurship in general. Veterans I've worked with or mentored include breweries and distilleries, plumbers, electricians, hybrid rocket motor companies, as well as more general technology startups and creative enterprises. Their focus on bringing success to Canada is clearly not defined to one sector, but they all universally use the mindset and skills developed in service to build businesses, create jobs, and contribute to the resilience of the Canadian economy. Across my experience in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada, the fundamentals of this discussion are consistent. Veterans bring leadership, discipline, resilience, and a demonstrated ability to operate in uncertain, high-pressure conditions. They are trained to take responsibility, to make decisions with incomplete information, and to execute in complex environments. These are not abstract qualities. They align directly with what is required to build and sustain a business. Where the difference emerges is not in the veteran, it is in the system they enter after service. In the United States, there is a clearer institutional cultural signal that military service is a foundation for continued economic participation, including entrepreneurship. There are identifiable pathways through training, procurement, and capital that make starting a business feel like a viable, supported next step. In the United Kingdom, although the scale is smaller, veteran networks, mentorship, and targeted support create a relatively coherent environment for translating military experience into commercial activity. In Canada, what I observe is different. We have strong individual programs, committed people, and a number of very entrepreneurial veteran-led charities and networks. Organizations such as Treble Victor, True Patriot Love, and several veteran-founded social ventures have themselves been built by veterans who saw a need and created something new. But from the perspective of a member leaving service, these do not yet consistently present as a coherent system. What our veterans encounter is less a pathway and more a landscape. Valuable elements that must be found, interpreted, and stitched together, often at the moment when clarity would be most helpful for the veteran. From our vantage point at VimiForge and Tidal Venture Partners, this shows up in three practical ways. First, there does not appear to be a clear front door. A veteran who is curious about starting or acquiring a business does not reliably encounter a structured progression from initial interest to testing and validation, to launch and then growth, or if necessary, to trying again after a setback. In practice, the veteran entrepreneur is left to navigate the system independently rather than being guided through it. Second, there is a misalignment between the pace and nature of entrepreneurship and the design of veteran support systems. Entrepreneurship is iterative and non-linear. It involves experimentation, calculated risk, and course correction. Support systems, by contrast, are often built around predictable, linear outcomes. As a result, the system is often experienced less as support and more as friction at critical moments. Thirdly, there is an underused opportunity to connect veteran entrepreneurship more deliberately to areas of national priority. This includes defense, security, and advanced technologies, where veterans bring operational insight into real-world challenges such as logistics, communications, decision-making under pressure, and others, as well as sectors like infrastructure, manufacturing, energy, health, and local services. Without deliberate pathways into these markets, veterans, often the exact experienced end user that defines the agile methodology, are often positioned at the margins or even outside of the areas where their experience is directly relevant and can have the most impact.
Thank you.
It is
Mr. McSporn, I have to say we're almost a minute extra. I tried to, I sincerely apologize, but we will, if you want to just 10 seconds just to complete your statement, and then we'll go for our third person.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. If I may leave the committee with one observation, it is this. The question is not whether veterans have the capacity to succeed as entrepreneurs. The question is whether our systems are structured in a way that allows that capacity to be discovered, supported, and when necessary, rebuilt after failure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third person, Mrs. Heather Van der Veer, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Chair, honourable members, I thank you for appear today. My name is Heather Van der Veer. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran and co-founder of Alberta Recoil, a veteran-led organization providing peer support, advocacy, consulting, training for military members and veterans affected by operational stress injuries and military sexual traumas. Before I continue, I would like to pass on my regrets from my business partner, John Sr., who wished to be here today to testify, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he couldn't. Today, I would like to speak to a gap within the veteran policy that is often overlooked. Veteran entrepreneurship, particularly among female veterans, is not being adequately supported within existing systems. Despite commitments to gender equity and improved veteran outcomes, female business partner owners are still unintentionally being excluded from funding opportunities, partnerships, and program development, especially when their work focuses on peer support, prevention, education, and community well-being. These barriers are not always explicit, but they are persistent. Veterans bring significant strengths into entrepreneurships: discipline, mission-focused, leadership under pressure, logistical problem-solving, and most of all, lived experience. Veterans Affairs has acknowledged that military skills are transferable to business ownerships. However, the system itself has not fully adapted to support veterans who choose entrepreneurship as their transition pathway. Veteran entrepreneurs continue to face systemic challenges, including limited data and visibility, uncertainty on how to make business income interacts with VAC benefits, inconsistent decision-making when entrepreneurship is part of rehabilitation, transition times that do not align with the realities of building a business, administrative burdens that are particularly difficult for those managing service-related injuries. At its core, the system is designed to transition veterans into employment, not building a business, and that distinction matters. There is also an eternal divide that must also be acknowledged. Within veteran entrepreneurship, there is a noticeable gap between officers and non-commissioned members. Officers often transition with recognized credentials, stronger institutional networks, and familiarity with procurement systems. These factors create clear pathways into advisory roles and funded opportunities. Non-commissioned members, despite extensive operational leadership experience, often transition without those same networks of recognition. For women, particularly from those non-commissioned backgrounds, this gap is even more pronounced. They face a higher credibility threshold that directly impacts their ability to succeed. Through Alberta Recoil, we have delivered a structured 3-day peer support workshop specifically for veterans affected by military sexual trauma. To date, we have supported over 125 participants. These programs were developed in direct response to the complex realities of military sexual trauma, delivered in trauma-informed environments that reflect military culture, barriers to disclosure, and the long-term effects of institutional betrayal. And yet, despite this work, women veterans continue to struggle to access support to these programs. There is limited recognition, limited integration, and very little institutional uptake. In fact, we have had more success working with the RCMP and partners in the United States than we have within our own veteran systems. To my knowledge, Alberta Recoil remains the only organization in Canada providing structured multi-day MST-specific peer supporting program of its kind. We have collaborated with the SMSRC, the military, and the RCMP. We continue to show up, but credibility remains a barrier. And I will say this plainly. If my background were different, if I fit a more traditional or more accepted profile, this conversation might be very different. First, entrepreneurship must be formally recognized as a legitimate transition and rehabilitation pathway within VAC policy. Second, there must be a clear and consistent guidance on how business income interacts with benefits, so veterans are not discouraged from pursuing entrepreneurship. Third, funding and partnership opportunities must be more accessible to veteran-led organizations, including those led by women and non-commissioned members. And finally, credibility must be earned through outcome, not assumed on rank, gender, or background. Veteran entrepreneurs are not asking for special treatment. They are asking for the opportunity to contribute solutions, many of which the government has already identified as necessary. The capacity exists, the experience exists, the need is clear. The system simply needs to catch up. I thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Now we will start our round of questions. The first round will be 6 minutes for each member. And for those online, I have to apologize if I have to interrupt you. I try to be the very strict clock keeper. And Madame Gaudreau, once her turn, will be addressing you in French. So please make sure that you have the right channel at the bottom so you can hear Madame Gaudreau speak to you in French if you do not understand it. We will start with 6 minutes with Mrs. Wagenthal.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of you for being here today. We do really appreciate your service and also your, well, I would say very important testimony in this regard. I'm going to start very briefly, Ms. Vanderveer. Thank you so much. Could you explain to me how you came up with the name Recoil, just briefly?
Yes, I can. Many people ask about that one. It's a military term. You take a recoil after firing a weapon, or even simply when a child touches a stove, they recoil back, and then they learn not to touch it. It's not damaging, but then it's a learning process, and that's where we came up with the name.
That is what I expected. Thank you so much. The reality, too, that life is like that, and quite often we have to recoil. And I appreciate the creativity that's in a lot of the names of organizations that veterans have to help each other. So thank you for that. You mentioned about the struggles that you feel women entrepreneurs have. Interestingly, we had someone else speaking here about being an entrepreneur and was not negative at all in saying this, just simply noted that there are pathways for women, Indigenous, and Black individuals to get assistance from VAC. Are you not able to access that, or just give me an idea of its impact on your ability to run your business?
We have actually applied for funding 3 years in a row, and we have not received any funding from the SMRC or the Veterans Wellbeing.
Were you given a reason?
The first reason was when we very first applied the first year, we were actually had been listed for-profit, so which we had to change for a non-for-profit, but we're never given a reason as to why we're not accepted. It's, thank you very much for your application, however.
Right. Okay. It'd be interesting to follow up on those and see what the uptake is and where the money is being spent. Mr. Strozer, Corporal for Life, it sounds like you have a natural ability to be an entrepreneur and to hang in there through things, although that. I hear your perspective being very different. But entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and you clearly show that tenacity. You mentioned once about one of the challenges that you're facing is hiring. Do you hire
Correct.
veterans only?
So when I had my first store, I wanted to, that was part of the experience, right? Serving reservists and veterans was the goal. I've opened it up to family members if need be, but it really, I've noticed when I had my stores that people do appreciate the fact that they're speaking to a veteran or a serving member while they're shopping our products.
Yeah, I can appreciate that in light of what your specific business is. It is very veteran-centric. At the same time, a lot of veterans also are pleased to be involved simply to be an entrepreneur within the whole system. But I have to applaud those of you that take on entrepreneurship simply very much focused because of your desire to serve other veterans. So I appreciate that. Let's see. Mr. McSporran, I found it interesting that you did talk about the incredible talents and gifts that our veterans do bring to entrepreneurship. And it was interesting to hear your perspectives next to Ms. Vanderveer's in regard to the difference, quite honestly, in the uptake between officers and non-commissioned veterans with the ability to get what they need and to succeed. Can you tell me where you focus most? I think we need an across-the-board approach, and yours seems to be focused more so on the officer side of the equation. Is that true or no?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It is focused on the entrepreneur and providing support, particularly on the technical side for companies at Vimy Forge that meet a need and requirement in defence, and quite often, as I'm sure that the other witnesses will echo, it's quite often the junior person that comes up with the best idea, and it's helping them translate that into something which has meaning to the people that make decisions. If there was one thing I would say, it's just that it reflects against some of the comments. The officer is often better equipped and has been better trained to deal with those types of higher level discussions, to force the point and to just get on with stuff. So it does appear, and it is clear, but the work that Vimy Forge does is not focused on officers or anything else like that. It's the people with the best ideas.
I have 1 minute left here for you to respond to this. You talked about not having a clear front door and the steps available to succeed the first time, but you also mentioned or to try again. And this is something that I think is really important to entrepreneurship. Do you find a lot of circumstances where there are individuals who do fail initially, not of your own accord often, but it is a challenging way to earn a living and to provide an living for others? So where did you go with that try again side of it? What do you do to try to encourage that? Canadians tend to be shy of that.
15 seconds.
Yeah, just to help people understand that if they do have a failure, it's not the end of the road. It's part of the learning process. And it's a training environment in its own right in many respects, but to have supporters who understand that as well.
Thank you very much. And now for 6 minutes, Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for your testimony, and of course, thank you for your service to our country. I'll sort of go in sequence, kind of the way Ms. Wagenthal went through as well, just on the presentations as well. So to Mr. Strosser first. You did bring up sort of a couple of points along the way about your business, but your business, where did you get the idea of a clothing? Is it something that you might have been doing before you retired, or is it something that sort of popped up as an opportunity after your service ended?
So it was actually a friend of mine who I'd served with was visiting Windsor, where I'm from, and we were just talking about our pride in service and the fact that I'm a t-shirt guy. I like to wear t-shirts. And there was nothing out there specifically that I felt I could wear or wanted to wear. So that's kind of where it started. Just something that I felt comfortable wearing that other veterans or serving members would like to wear as well.
You know, my brother actually lives in Chatham and worked out at Windsor for a little while, so he does have a few of your things. I've seen him at a couple of events with him on.
That's amazing.
You did bring up the issue of trying to hire veterans.
Correct.
Have you used the ESDC website or the job bank? Because there is a section there for veterans, fully knowing that you still have to self-identify as a veteran on that platform. But did you have an opportunity to maybe use ESDC service?
No, I have not, to be honest with you. The only, like I said, the hiring I did was pretty much social media based and word of mouth.
And you did mention that there in your testimony, you were talking about collaboration with others, working with other individuals that are interested in setting up businesses. have you had the opportunity to reach out to other organizations to support you? And maybe, because I know the time will run out of my question period here too, of what kind of supports would you have required in view of how much money would it be to set up a business like the business you set up?
I was very fortunate. I met a gentleman from a company called Canna Connect, and he's actually been a huge mentor to me since about 5 years ago. So I was lucky to run into him, and he's really helped me with any questions I've had. He helped me get a store running out in Oromocto. So I mean, just having people available to help out with questions, I guess, like mentorship, is my biggest thing.
Right, and then sort of the second part of that question is, if you're going to set up a business, I mean, there is the transition that normally when a person retires from the armed forces, that we help support them in retraining or what have you. That some of the testimony that we've gotten here in the last few meetings that we've had is maybe you can transition that into some kind of support for entrepreneurship. And I think Madame Vanderveer talked about that in her presentation. Would it be a large amount of money? Is it a grant of $50,000? Like what would be a best support for a business like yours?
I think honestly, if I wouldn't have wanted to get a big amount of money at the beginning because I wouldn't have known what to do with it. These past 10 years have really helped sort out where my focus goes and that's how the business has survived. But even $10,000 a couple of years ago would have been a huge boon to the business, right? I may again have been able to keep a store open. I may not have been able to keep all three open, but Windsor would have had a shot to survive. But it got to a point where, with the COVID restrictions and such, it just got to a point where I was using my own money for my own job, and that's when it kind of had to stop.
So I'll move on to a couple more questions with our other guest. Yep, Mr. McSporran, when you did talk about, and we've had this in a couple presentations as well, when we talk about the U.S., the program that they have, and you were also talking about the U.K. having a program as well. What kind of entrepreneurial program could Canada consider to support their veterans?
It could have a really good funded program. To be perfectly honest, I think we've got all the components necessary for it. It just needs to be sort of centrally managed and governed and coordinated between all the different groups that are already there to support to businesses and some companies need investment, some companies need and the leaders need training. It's just making sure that that's matched properly and meets the needs and requirements for them. But I do think we've got everything here. We just need that top cover umbrella. And
maybe finally, my last minute is to Madame Vanderveer of Recoil. Is in talking about your program and sort of reading up a little bit about it. Some of the people that come to your organization, do they have service-related trauma, or are we working through? What kind of veteran is coming to your program and accessing the services that you provide?
The veterans that we have coming to our program obviously have service-related injuries. We especially work with survivors of military sexual trauma, both male and female, and we offer them peer support, one-on-one peer support. And we work with the RCMP and other uniformed services as well.
Entrepreneurial comes up quick.
Yes.
Okay.
Now pour 6 minutes, Madame Gaudreau. Je veux juste faire certain. I just want to make sure que vous m'entendez.
I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me when I'm speaking in French. Can all of the witnesses hear me? Because Madame Gaudreau will be speaking in French. Okay, great. Madame Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, it's a real pleasure to see you all this morning. It's really a positive experience hearing your testimony. I think it's really important to note when good things happen, and these are examples of good things happening. Now, at the outset, I have a question for Ms. Vanderveer. When it comes to penalizing people, you say that there's a threshold of credibility that is higher for women, and that it's harder for women to get that assistance. So, concretely, what does that look like?
what that looks like is, for example, when my business partner and I first started the business, they recognized him as the face of the business, and they always thought I was the administrative person. They didn't see me as a co-founder. They always wanted to speak to him. They always wanted to include him in the meetings, and at times there was a pause when he would say, no, Heather is my partner and so is my wife. So there's actually two females that are co-founders of this business as well. And we've seen it numerous times with the different organizations that we've dealt with, that they only want to speak to my business partner. I hope that answers your question.
Donc, c'est à l'intérieur des octrois.
So it's when it comes to awarding assistance, either mentorship, assistance, that type of thing. That's when you feel that you're not getting the recognition or the help that you need.
Correct. And as well, what we have also seen, because it is dealing with military sexual trauma, many places we've gone to for funding, they like the concept of what we do, but nobody wants to fund it. Or we're being told, well, the SMSRC is already doing peer support, or this organization is doing peer support. But unfortunately, the SMSRC's peer support is sorely lacking. Eight meetings do not constitute for peer support. And also the same with our workshops as well. We're the only one offering these workshops. And again, there's a lot of interest in what we do, but nobody wants to fund us.
OK. Donc, Madame la Présidente, ce que je constate, c'est qu'il y a il va falloir.
So, Madam Chair, it seems to me that this is something we'll have to revisit. And in our report, it'll be interesting to see, what is the profile of different entrepreneurs and what are the challenges that they face. It seems to me that the first challenge here is really sorting out who are the entrepreneurs and the companies that we need to focus on and, which ones really need recognition. That's really important. What reassures me is that the qualities of some of these veteran entrepreneurs are really substantial. I'm going to ask this question to Mr. McSporran. It seems to me that there is not a specific sort of entry way where, either through the knowledge of companies or peers or experts, where there's sort of like a clear entryway for veterans who want to go into business. There's no really clear pathway. Is that correct?
From my perspective, yes, and I think Nicholas would agree with this. There is local groups that may be able to support an individual, provide them with advice or mentorship, but there is no clear programmatic system which links all of the resources together from coast to coast, and that doesn't matter whether it's a distillery or whether it's a high-end defense tech company, and that's part of what we're trying to address with Vimy Forge in the defense and security technologies area, is to provide that tent which everybody can come into in order to support the small and medium businesses. 4 out of our 10 initial companies in the first cohort for Vimy Forge are veteran-owned or veteran-led.
Merci. Bien, ma dernière question va s'adresser à Monsieur Strasser.
Thank you. And my last question is for Mr. Strasser. Although there are many organizations, federal and provincial, that provide assistance to private sector entrepreneurs to help you, it seems to me that the ultimate question is, if every veteran wanted to go into business, or rather, if every veteran who wanted to go into business had to get, a different type of assistance than the assistance available for civilians, to get some.
Est-ce que ça devait être la même chose pour tout le monde?
So if I've understood your question correctly, you're asking, should it be the same assistance for everyone? It's a good question. I don't know. I know that for me, as I said earlier, $10,000 would have been really great. But I'm at a point now where I have enough money to continue my business, but I may arrive at a point later on where I do need more money. I've also applied for grants and loans in the past, but given who I am, I haven't gotten any positive responses. Okay, next round. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Thank you.
Start our second round for 5 minutes. We'll start with Mr. Richards.
First of all, thank you, as has been said already, to the veterans who were with us today, whether in person or virtual, for your service to our country. And I really appreciated all three of you came with ideas and solutions, which is really important when we're doing these kinds of studies. I'm going to dig in on a couple of things if I can. I'll maybe start with you, Ms. Vanderveer. You had made the comment that there needs to be better, I think you put it as there needs to be better guidance on how business income would interact with benefits. I think that sounded to me like a polite way of suggesting that perhaps some veterans are seeing their benefits threatened or lost or cut back as a result of earning business income. And if you could maybe just clarify what you've seen in that regard, and if so, that's a real problem I think that we need to make sure we address.
Yes, it is, Mr. Richards. Because, for example, both John Sr. and I are on disability, or diminished earnings capacity. So we only are allowed to make an additional $20,000. So the company is new. We have not received funding or grants, so there are days we are barely keeping the lights on, and the whole premise of what we do is not to make money. I will just state that. However, there is always that fear when I speak with John Sr. and myself and with other veterans who own businesses. That is always the fear, that if they go above that 20,000 threshold, that then their benefits will be decreased, and then there's nothing to fill that gap.
So that sounds to me like, we've got a situation here where we should be encouraging veterans to use their talents and skills, and their very unique talents and skills. And what's happening instead is there seems to be some disincentivization that's happening there in terms of what happened with their benefits. And that's a real problem that you've identified, and I hope that we can address that in our report. Mr. Strosser, you had mentioned three things that you felt, from your experience and the experience of others you've worked with, could be better. And you mentioned
Correct.
Funding, which has been addressed, I think, already with some of the questions. So I want to address the other couple, which is mentorship
Right.
and staffing. You mentioned mentorship, then you've offered mentorship to other veterans looking to start a business. Has any of that been sort of referred to you by Veterans Affairs? Is there any connection of Veterans Affairs in that, or is this people who are finding you because they're not getting that support from Veterans Affairs?
So the second one, I've been approached I've been doing it for like I said, 11 years. So we're big on social media. So we are a well-known brand, and I've had multiple over the years, other veterans come up and ask for just any sort of mentorship. And I've pretty much given what I've received and what I've learned. So that's something I'd like to do in the future, is help veterans, but I don't know where I'd be if I had that earlier on.
Would you say that's something that there needs to be at Veterans Affairs, some kind of coordination of veterans looking for mentorship to connect them with other veterans that could provide that mentorship? Is that something that should be coordinated there?
I believe so. I know at one point, I believe it was Prince's Trust had something. I was actually approached 5 or 6 years ago about being a mentor, but at that time I needed a mentor. So as much as I wanted to be one, I really,
Right.
I couldn't help if I couldn't, if I didn't have the knowledge, what am I going to give out?
Okay, and then on the staffing side, you mentioned as well that, you've kind of reached most people through social media and things. Is this an area where, have you kind of approached Veterans Affairs? Like, do they have a repository of veterans looking for employment in a veteran business? Or, is this something that needs to be established as well, that Veterans Affairs could do better in terms of coordinating opportunities for veterans looking for employment and for veteran-owned businesses looking for veterans to work?
Now, I'll be honest, I've only ever Googled, Canadian veterans looking for work, and it hasn't got me very far. So I think if there was some sort of data bank of I don't know if you can do reservists as well as veterans, but I'm fortunate that I can go speak to reserve regiments here in town and recruit directly. But it would be nice to be able to have a bank of individuals looking for work, because I do want this brand to continue to grow into different areas of the country, and I can't do it on my own.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate those insights, and again, just thank you to all of you for coming with solutions. That's so critically important when we not just identify the problems, but to identify the solutions. And I think you've all come with some great suggestions today that I hope can make our report. So.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Saint-Pierre va aussi...
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Saint-Pierre is also going to be asking questions both in French and English. So again, just make sure that you have the language that you would like to hear the questions in selected. Mr. Saint-Pierre, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. As a person from Montreal, I will be asking questions both in French and in English. Ms. Vanderveer, your work focuses on some approaches that really focus on the reality of survivors. Now, in your opinion, what model of, from different communities should be integrated into public programs to better reflect veterans' needs, notably when it comes to complex issues?
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Yeah, if maybe I'll ask the question in English. Yeah. So your work really highlighted the approaches that are really grounded in the lived realities of survivors. In your view, which elements of community-based models should be more systemically integrated into public policy? Or, what lessons from serving the community should we integrate into policymaking?
I believe, again, I'm not 100% sure I understand what you're asking. But for us, what we do in supporting survivors, the reason we do what we do is because we have found the community doesn't understand the complexities of military sexual trauma and the institutional trauma and betrayal. So I guess maybe that's why I'm struggling with how to best answer your question, because there is nothing in the civilian community that can support us, and this is why we offer the supports that we do.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Mr. Strasser, maybe I'll move on to you. Always love a good T-shirt myself, so big fan of the work that you do. So thank you for all the work you've done, and thank you for your services. You mentioned earlier the challenges you had around accessing loans, or I think you mentioned something to the effect that the loans were quite expensive, or they seem to be very prohibitive. I'm just wondering if you can maybe elaborate a little bit on your own experience with said loans.
Right. So I've never been great with finances. So that obviously with the banks, they're going to laugh me out right away. I have been able to get, so Shopify is the host of my website. They offer Shopify Capital, which again is not great rates, but it helps when need be. And then I've also had banks reach out. I don't know if they're banks, but they're loan sharks, I would call them, have reached out. And I was denied at one point, and then all of a sudden, now you're ready for a big loan. Well, now I don't need it. But it'd be much nicer. And again, I don't think giving me $20,000 when I first started would have been a great idea, because I wouldn't have had a clue what to do with it. But maybe with a mentor and a little bit of money, I could have avoided some of the blocks that I've hit so far. But I mean, like I said, I'm not complaining about what I've done so far, but it's just, there's a few things that would have helped out and could have been maybe a smoother ride.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing your experience there. And I'm curious, because your business seems to promote Canadian identity and military service through the products being offered. How can we better support the visibility and market access of businesses like yours, especially around promoting Canadian products and Canadian content?
I mean, other than, I know there are a few websites out there that promote Canadian veteran businesses and products and stuff like that. I don't know how the government could get involved in that. I'm sure they could in some way, but again, just the biggest thing would be whether it's a bank or whether it's a grant of some sort or a low interest rate for veterans who qualify, obviously. but I think there could have been, I've almost shut this down numerous times, but I have a great job behind me that provides me a great income. But I'm hoping one day that, Corporate for Life will be that income if I can get to that point. But just a little bit of money, a little bit of help would have probably carried me a lot farther.
Great. Well, thanks for coming in today, and thanks for all the great work that you do with your business.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll move on to Mr. McSporran. As part of our study on the barriers to entrepreneurship for veterans, do you see specific challenges faced by veterans who are looking to start or even expand or grow their businesses?
Yes, and particularly in those sort of high value sectors where I look at particularly, and it's literally the ability to go and speak to people and have the discussions about how a business plan might evolve. And if you're looking at defence, it literally, I've got a team here in New Brunswick. They've got a fantastic solution. They've asked me for some help, and I said, yeah, I'll try and do the introduction. And the introduction I got from a world-class solution was, we can't speak to them, because there's no mechanism for us to make that look fair, because we can't speak to them without speaking to the big companies.
I'm very sorry, I do have to interrupt. Thank you very, very much. Pour 2 minutes et demie, Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The question is for Mr. Strasser. Thank you very much for speaking French. Your French is great. And also it allows me to speak a bit faster and, not lose any time. So my question. We were talking about subsidies, loans, grants, interest-free loans. Do you think that you are discriminated against compared to an ordinary person like me who went into business 10 years ago? I don't know if I call it discrimination, but as I said, my finances weren't always the best at every point. So even if I tell the bank that I need some money for my business venture, I wouldn't qualify. So that's like any entrepreneur that doesn't have capital to get started. Correct. Okay, so where I'm going with this is I realize that we need to reform and review the eligibility criteria and the criteria for awarding contracts and assistance in order to maintain the benefits for you as long as you are, in business. Of course, things are often very uncertain in business, but anyway, that's the first thing. All the witnesses say, beyond a certain amount of money, like $20,000, for example, you're cut off. So there's that. Then we also need to make sure that veterans, men and women, are assisted in an equitable fashion. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we understand all of the resources that exist and that we've really inventoried them, because there are so many different resources. I think there are even places in Quebec like, the Maison de l'Entrepreneur, and there are many, many people who need access to human resources, funding from Ottawa, funding from the provinces. And, this organization brings them all together. Now, I'm just wondering, with a situation like that, would that have helped you out? Yes, I think absolutely. I said earlier that, I'd like to see that assistance for veterans, but I don't have a single spot where I can go to get that assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you. We just have a few minutes left, so I think I might open the door to Mr. Richards and Mr. Casey. We have about 5 minutes before we move over to the second panel, so let's say 2.5 minutes for Mr. Richards and then 2.5 for Mr. Casey.
For anyone who wants to answer it, I've got a bit more general business-related question, not specific to veterans, but you might be able to help with. Over the last 10 years, we've seen a significant shift in the number of, it used to be 10 years ago that when a Canadian started a business, it was in Canada 2/3 of the time, and elsewhere 1/3 of the time. It's reversed now that 2/3 of those businesses are being started outside of Canada. So I'm wondering if anyone here has any comments on or thoughts around that, why that might be, and if there's anything that we could suggest that could improve that. Does anyone, just put your hand up? I'll start with you, Mr. McSporran.
Just a quick answer, and obviously this is very much in the technical space. 50% of all companies in Canada that receive $1 million or more in equity are now outside of Canada. And part of the reason for that is our startups are undervalued. That's not just in the tech sector as well. So we really don't place enough value on those startups. And when it comes to veterans, it's even lower, because I don't think we understand the value that the veterans bring to the business ecosystem when they start a company. That's just my thoughts and opinions.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to see if you have any thoughts on how we could improve that, but I wanted to give the other two, if they had any comment on this, a chance first. But
Can you just ask the question again, please?
well,
I'm sorry.
what we're seeing is more and more entrepreneurs are choosing to start their businesses outside of Canada, Canadian entrepreneurs. And so what I'm wanting to know is if you could give us any elaboration on what you see as being the reasons for that, and what we might be able to do to help fix that.
Can, because right now we have been in talks with different organizations in the U.S. about the workshops and the programs that we offer, and there's a huge interest, a huge buy-in. What we find here when we go to offer it here, the first thing that we're told is that, we do not have a degree in psychology, but you don't need a degree in psychology to offer peer support. And again, when we offer our workshops, they're not from a mental health professional, they're from like a psycho-ed professional. So that is what we run into. So when we present this in the States, they see the value of peer support.
Cool. Thank you. Mr. Casey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Strosser, I don't have a question for you, but I have a request of you. Please have a look at jobbank.gc.ca/hiring/veterans. So that is a veterans job bank. The committee would be most interested in your feedback as someone who has encountered some frustration. Please feel free to follow up with the committee once you get a look at that. Thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. McSporran, you didn't get a chance to complete your opening statement at the outset, and what you did have to say I found fascinating. Can you go back and see what was left out and finish it now? Is he gone?
No, he's there.
Is he?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Casey. That's that window shut when I went out from it. But unfortunately, but in essence, it's really focused on just the value that the veterans bring. And in particular, the way in which everybody talks about agile methodology in business. The agile methodology is based on the focus brought by the end user, and everybody forgets about this, that the veterans coming out have been that end user and allow people, particularly in the defence and national security environments, to create the solutions that we need nationally. We see, I'll just use one statistic for you. The largest defence company in Canada, Canadian-owned defence company, is CAE, which will be familiar to many. It's the 74th largest defence company in the world. All the rest of our defence contracts are flowing to big companies where the IP doesn't sit in Canada. And we can improve that using small and medium businesses that are set up by veterans who know what the solution is that the forces need.
Thank you. Ms. Vanderveer, you mentioned a frustration around the interaction between benefits and entrepreneurial income. There has been a motion placed on notice to increase the threshold for those on the income replacement benefit by 75%. Do you think that would help?
Absolutely, it would help.
Hopefully that study will get adopted. We'll bring you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our witnesses. J'aimerais remercier les témoins. And for
I'd like to
those
thank all the witnesses.
country and in so many ways continue to do so. Thank you for your word of wisdom this morning. So on that, we will be suspending and welcoming our other panel. Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais faire quelques
Just want to make a few observations concerning the new witnesses. Now, before speaking, please wait to be named. And if you are participating online, please click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. And please remain on mute if you are not speaking. When it comes to interpretation, if you're on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen between the floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, you can use your earpieces and select the right channel.
Witnesses as an individual, Mr. William Steed by video conference, IMT Group, Mr. Arjun Graywall, Lead Defense Innovation, and from VCATS Inc., Mr. Joseph Blanchard, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Veterans Entrepreneurship Hub by video conference. Welcome to the three of you. We will open with Mr. Steed. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, and each of you will receive the same 5 minutes. Merci beaucoup.
Hello. Thank you for having me today. I'm very pleased to be part of this group, and just hope I can pass on a few instances where I could be helpful going forward for other veteran entrepreneurs. I've been running my business now for 8 years, and basically started as a ground up, no working capital, and basically no support from the banks, D&D, Veterans Affairs, or anything like that. What I found is there's quite a community of organizations within Department of National Defense and Veterans Affairs that are looking for programs that can help veterans in transition or work through PTSD and things like that. So I do a lot of work with veterans organizations and some work with D&D through Soldier On, and the OSI clinic are two that I've worked with. Also military family support centers. I've done work with them as well too, hosting classes for veterans in blacksmithing. I also travel around Western Canada and work with various veterans charities and work to support veterans and show them some blacksmithing techniques, and we do workshops and classes and things like that. Now, what I've found is there's not really, and this is only my experience, there's not really a central depository of information available for an entrepreneur like myself on how to be included in Department of National Defense or Veterans Affairs programs where we can provide our services to. That would have been helpful. All the work that I've done to date usually has been members of those groups contacting me through word of mouth, or hearing about me through word of mouth, or they've searched my website online or through Facebook or something like that. So, it's been very informal. There hasn't been anything that I've actually gone to look for programs where I could be of assistance to veterans going forward. And that's basically one of the hurdles that I see. And that would be something that I'd like to hear some feedback on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steed. Now for 5 minutes, Mr. Blanchard, for 5 minutes, Joseph.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Chair,
Thank you very much.
committee, fellow presenters. My name is Dr. Joseph Blanchard. I'm a veteran of approximately 30 years, and I'm the founder of VCATS, Veterans Career Assistance and Transition Services, and also, and that's been for 12 years. And in the last 6 years, I've started an organization called the Veterans Entrepreneurship Hub, known as Vet Hub. Approximately 6,000 Canadian Forces members transition out of the service every year.
These individuals bring a lot of skills, leadership under pressure, operational planning experience, logistics, security, technical expertise, and mission-first mindset. Yet, despite these strengths, many face critical questions. Where do I fit into our civilian economy? For a growing number, the answer is entrepreneurship, but the system is not built for them. And you've heard this over all of your meetings recently. The core problem, veterans are not failing because of the lack of capability. They are facing systemic barriers, which include lack of structured transition pathways into business ownership, limited access to coordinated training, mentorship, and funding, a procurement system that takes about 3 to 5 years today, which is far too long for a startup company to survive, difficulty translating military experience into business credibility, and the loss of identity, purpose, and sense of community post-service. Approximately 20% of all startups in Canada fail within the first year, often due to the lack of support systems, not the lack of talent. VCATS and Vet Hub, through our programs, we support veterans in their transition. We help them with identity, career paths, building the skills that they need to survive in the civilian world and connect to opportunities that are available. But we quickly realized something larger was needed. This is where we started the Veterans Entrepreneurship Hub. The Vet Hub is designed by veterans, for veterans, and it's to enable successful business creation and growth. Our model is simple. It's an infrastructure that brings together 5 critical components. One is the training and education, which leverages the ETB, or the Veterans Education and Training Benefit, and some of the CAF transition policies that are available. We have mentorship and leadership development that will be a huge and critical part of the Vet Hub. Access to capital, or what I call the financial runway for a business to be successful, which will include items of, startup money for home-based businesses, angel investors, veteran capital, and of course, access to government programs. Shared services and business support, very similar to what we get in the military. You have a centralized component that will reduce significant barriers on these companies, where we centralize the HR function, the finance function, the marketing function, and of course, operational support. Procurement, access, and acceleration, creating pathways for veteran-owned businesses to sell into government faster. And one of those components I can speak to later would be the discussions with the Deputy Minister and her Assistant Deputy Ministers over in Procurement Canada. The strategic opportunity for us in Canada is where Vet Hub becomes a more supported program that is a national strategic asset. Veterans are security cleared, operational experience, trusted within the defense and public safety environments. With the right structure, they can help accelerate innovation in defense and security and public services. They're able to reduce procurement timelines today from 3 to 5 years into 12 to 18 months. And that's based on a couple factors. Number one is their security clearances for a veteran-owned business. This aligns directly, of course, with Canada's priorities in defense innovation and supply chain resiliency, including economic growth. What we are asking for is the ability to build something, not from scratch, but to formalize and scale the Vet Hub. Specifically, establish Vet Hub as a national entrepreneurship ecosystem comparable to the women's, Black, and Indigenous entrepreneurship programs over the last 6 years that have received funding. Create
Mr.
a veterans procurement.
I'm so sorry. I have
No,
to.
no.
I forgot to mention that I am the clock keeper, and I will have to interrupt you, Mr. Blanchard. I hope that you'll have time during the round of questions, but due to the time frame, I have to interrupt, and I sincerely apologize, Dr. Blanchard. Thank you. So, Mr. Grewal, for 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, thank you, and committee, thank you for having me. It's a true privilege to be here today. Before I begin, I want to recognize something that isn't often said in rooms like this, but thank you for your pursuit of continuous improvement and getting informed opinions from veterans across Canada is really important to help inform that continuous improvement, so thank you. Within the forces, soldiers share a lot of shared experiences, and I feel the same thing happens on the outside, whether through entrepreneurial pursuits, retirement, or others. And sometimes in forums like this, it can be difficult to share new information or new experiences that can reflect that. So I want to take a little turn and really look towards the future. We live in an unprecedented time economically and militarily and geopolitically, and looking to set the stage of these influential policies for future veterans as a result of the experiences that current soldiers are going to be facing over the next 20 to 30 years. For that, I'd like to share a little bit of context of my own journey. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces when I was 17, and that decision shaped everything in my life since. My service was unique. At the outset of the global war on terror, I spent 13 years of my career with Canadian Special Operations, which had me deploy multiple times to multiple places, and I loved all of it. I had a fantastic military career, and I owe a lot to the people I met and the relationships that were forged. My career was defined by genuine hardships and risk, but at the same time, measurable impact. And I consider all of that as feeding my current journey into private business and entrepreneurship. One of the greatest strengths of that career, as I mentioned, was an organic network of friends, colleagues, and mentors that formed around it. That network provided support during deployments, transition, entrepreneurship, with no formal program could ever offer, and I'm sure many of my colleagues and veterans would echo that. Associations such as Blackstone Association, Alliance for Canadian Defence Companies, have created additional communities, and like many that Joe is running as well, are building these in the private sector for veterans to reach out to and help enable. I'm married. I have 2 daughters. Every decision I made in uniform and every decision since has been shaped by the support I receive from them. They embody everything I care about and everything that is Canada. Our families are extended by the bonds that we form within the service. As I mentioned, those networks run very deep. Since leaving the Canadian Armed Forces 6.5 years ago, I dedicated my professional life to building a career serving organizations that connect military experience to civilian life, to include Burn Pit 360s Canada and Burn Pit 360s US, which is a US organization that forged the PACT Act, which is a US veteran fund for toxic exposure. I've also worked with Blackstone Association and Erase PTSD by Dr. Eugene Lipoff, who is advancing approaches such as stellate ganglion block and procedures to support veteran healthcare. Today, I am a team member on the Military Casualty Support Foundation, which is run by the family that runs IMT Corporation, one of Canada's premier defense companies. And I'm also the founder and CEO of the Arctic Training Center, a northern Arctic-based training facility privately owned to help fill the gaps of the CAF, but also our NATO allies. We're often asked when coming into this, I know I was when I shared my invitation with my currently serving colleagues and some of the ones that are retired, why? What's the effect that we are looking at achieving through this policy, education, information, and changes? Well, I propose to the committee that a flourishing veteran is the single most powerful recruiting tool Canada has. When veterans are visible in our communities, in business and public life, they attract others to service. And I don't think anybody here needs a reminder of how important that is in today's world. When veterans disappear into the silence or struggle without support, we actually lose an edge as a country. In that spirit, I'm going to be contributing through this conversation around points around the education training benefit, veterans employment market that is building the current defense industrial base in a large part, and the future veteran, as I mentioned. The future soldier will become a future veteran, and they will come to the civilian market with a new set of skills and a new view on the strategic landscape that Canada sits in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grewal. To all of you, thank you very much for your time. We will now open the round of questions. Mrs. Wagenthal for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all of you for what you're contributing today. It's deeply appreciated. This is the right time, as was mentioned, for us to get really serious about this. And it's interesting to me what I'm hearing today in regard to this decision to focus far more on veterans and what they can offer in light of where our country is at right now and where we are at with needing procurement within our national defense and the commitment that our Prime Minister has made. I have a question. I don't know how it really fits in, but it impacts me in my riding. We have a lot of manufacturers across Canada that work in this area of providing all kinds of materials created into something specific across the world. But they are not engaged at all within our own country, within the military side of procurement for Canada, that would really like to. So our Prime Minister mentioned just this weekend in a speech about the importance of we will be, with doing this national defense procurement, using our own resources, our steel, our aluminum, our rare minerals, and our tech, but has not spoken a lot about who's going to get to do this. So how do you see that working, Mr. Grewal, first of all, and then I would like to ask Mr. Blanchard as well. It seems that you have an inroad there. Is that true?
I would say the inroad is a result of trying to be everywhere, every time, and highlighting some of the values that not only myself but other veterans bring to the table, especially in that context. I think being here speaking on behalf of IMT, one of the teams that I work very closely with, they are a manufacturing company, one of Canada's largest defense companies, as I mentioned, that is completely sovereign and Canadian owned. And I would say the private sector is now starting to rotate into that direction to look at how to onboard the talent that is in existence across the forces, but across the veteran community as well. So I think it is incumbent on manufacturers and private businesses to do that outreach, whether it be on LinkedIn or other social media channels, or veteran job markets, where we can help amplify that link, maybe in sharing it more widely.
So can I suggest then that businesses that do exist and are very effective around the world, there should be a way to have them part of this dynamic and the opportunity to employ veterans as well?
Absolutely, and one of the points I'd like to make is that this is of course a Veterans Affairs Canada policy.
Exactly.
I think it should be coupled with economic policy, because incentivizing corporations to go out and buy veteran, just as we're buying Canadian, would be not only a boon to the veteran landscape but also to our economy. Small businesses across Canada employ 5.8 million people.
Right.
We have 6,000 veterans leaving the forces every year. If 20% of them were to start small businesses, that would be quite an economic engine.
Right. There's no question we need all hands on deck at this point in time. You mentioned, and I actually would like to speak to Mr. Blanchard about this, you both talked about the availability of the education training benefit. Mr. Blanchard, it sounds like you are quite engaged already, and if I was to look at what we've been discussing on this committee about entrepreneurship and veterans, you have a significant inroad and handle on what really is truly needed. Can you talk to me about the access to the education training benefit, please?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the access to the ETB, or Education and Training Benefit, is available to all veterans. There's different stages. 0 to 6 years is $6,100. 6 to 12 years is about $49,000, and over 12 years you are available to $99,000. We've been working with several universities and training institutions across Canada today to kind of connect through networks with the Veterans Entrepreneurship Hub, or the Vet Hub, the ability to meet companies, look at what type of a training pathway we can create with the education partners that will provide an opportunity within, we'll say, the manufacturing industry.
Appreciate that. Now, as you were talking about your 4 areas, I think it was 4, you said we will do. So these are things that Vet Hub is not currently doing. When did you begin this process, and how are you financed?
So approximately 6 years ago, I started Vet Hub. I'll call it bootstrapping the organization. And today I'm working with a partnership on the East Coast where we're doing our proof of concept. We're going to prepare a proposal at the end of that with our Vet Dev organization down east to be able to present to acquire money to build and scale the capacity of the Vet Hub right across the country.
Who is your partner? Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood. Who is your partner?
So I'm in discussions with the Nova Scotia government, St. Francis Xavier University, St. FX, and ACOA. And with the St. FX, they have a entrepreneurship wing that will deliver the entrepreneurship training called Coady Institute.
Support at this point in time.
Sorry?
You do have government support at this point in time.
The government support is mostly through discussions with other members of parliament and ministers.
Okay.
And yes, through the procurement piece, I've met with the Deputy Minister, Ressa,
Right.
and her team, and we're looking at an opportunity there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blanchard. So sorry again. Now for 6 minutes, Mrs. Hurtle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, I guess, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your continued service. I'd like to start with Mr. Steed, I think. What motivated you?
Yes.
What motivated you to pursue entrepreneurship after military service rather than pursuing employment in a larger or more traditional environment?
Well, I did work in the private theater, basically a private world, for quite some time. I did bounce around to quite a few jobs. I just never really seemed to fit in. The way I typically did things was very forward, very generally fairly aggressive, and I attribute that to military training, which served me well while I was in the military. But it is very difficult for civilian companies to adapt to someone that comes into the organization as very forward that way and very mission oriented, and looking at once I signed on with the company, it was all for the company, just like the military. You're all for the military, so I was go go go. That was off-putting to a lot of companies, and I struggled with that. So I did bounce around quite a bit, to the point where I just said enough's enough, and I'm going to do my own thing and start up from there. And basically grew it into a fairly successful business, and have been enjoying it since then. And I encourage fellow veterans that I work with to look at that as an opportunity as well. It's not for everyone, because there is a lot of stress, as the other business owners here will know, a lot of stress, and you really have to pivot from the military way of thinking into the business way of thinking. So it can be difficult, but for me, it was almost a necessity, because I really didn't fit into a lot of companies that I was working for.
Thank you. So what would you say, what skills from your naval service informed your approach to operating a small business?
Attention to detail was a big one, and also always looking to adapt to any sort of roadblock that would come up. Being quick to think on my feet, which was something that I attribute to the military for sure, and looking for ways around. But failure to adapt in the military is a failure. You have to adapt to equipment issues, to personnel issues, to environmental issues, things like that. So that really gave me a head start in business, because things are coming at you, 5 times a day that you may not expect. So you have to be able to adapt to them. So those were some of the key things that I took away from the military that has helped me in business.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Interesting, reading about your business and the blacksmithing, and that you feel it helps veterans maintain focus and concentration. I'm thinking it's probably a very meditative aspect when you're working with the steel. And would you say that that the hands-on aspect of the blacksmithing helps veterans with stress, maintaining their or managing their stress or their mental health challenges. We know that physical and mental ties, or the connection within the body is so great.
Absolutely, 100%. We've had some real success stories over the years with various programs that we've put on. And I can give an example. One case, we had a very hardened special operator that spent years in the forces, suffered pretty badly from PTSD symptoms. And when he took our workshop, we did a 2-day workshop at the Veterans Ranch in BC. CBC actually came up and did interviews, and he wanted to say his bit in front of the camera, and CBC he actually broke down and said that this is the best he's felt in years. So what we have, you exactly right. We have a very meditative process. You're focused 100% on what you're doing, so your mind is clear, and that seems to be an issue with a lot of vets suffering from mental health issues, is their mind is going a million miles a minute. But when you're blacksmithing, you have to focus on what you're doing, otherwise you get hurt. And pain is a great motivator to focus. So luckily, I've taught thousands of people, and we've never had an incident, and I want to keep it that way. We're very safety conscious, but it is always something that has to be in the back of the mind. And I think that does help. And also, creating something with your hands is very, very good for people. I think everyone should have some sort of a creative outlet, and we've introduced so many people to this that it's great, both civilians and veterans through the years here.
That's great, thank you. And I'm going to switch to Dr. Blanchard for a brief moment. My colleague, MP Danterma, and I are both from Nova Scotia, so I was interested to hear, and can you expand very, very briefly on the partnership with St. FX and the Coady Institute?
Thank you very much. The opportunity that I've been working on for the past year and a half is to be able to put the proof of concept and test it. With the Coady Institute, they have all of the education and training, including the 1-week boot camp, which we used to do with the POE, or Princes of Operations Entrepreneurship, which is now King's Trust, which don't do this anymore. The Nova Scotia government is very interested in being able to fill this gap. They've identified it as a gap in Nova Scotia for veterans. And from that point of view, they've said, hey, let's engage, let's start talking. I've talked with COA, and they're interested very much, not just from a Nova Scotia perspective, but from the Atlantic. We have the capability at St. FX to run with the entrepreneurship training and that, and we're good to go.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Blanchard. I'm looking at my colleagues with a very strong turn, yeah? It's like, and it's my third time interrupting you, so I sincerely apologize. Madame Gaudreau will have 6 minutes. Elle va vous parler en français, so s'il vous plaît.
She's going to be speaking in French, so please do put in your earpiece. Make sure that you can hear the interpreter. Can all 3 witnesses hear me when I'm speaking in French through the interpreter? Great. Madame Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you to you, witnesses. I was saying earlier how pleasant it is to see these success stories like yours. Thank you. Really, I think this is going to help us make good recommendations in our report. So my first question is simple, and it's for Mr. Steed and Mr. Greywall. Prior to today, were you familiar with VetHub? Mr. Steed first.
No, and I've taken the information down, and I will be researching it.
Excellent. Et Monsieur?
Great. And Mr. Greywall?
Joe and I know each other and have crossed paths a number of times, so yes, I have heard of it.
Excellent. Maintenant, mes questions.
Great. Now my questions are for Mr. Blanchard. You have shown that a service like yours, which is widely offered, but I mean, of course, you're not present in all of the provinces of Canada, notably Quebec, but do you think that a sort of inventory of all of the organizations providing support, peer support, would be more beneficial than not having that? So would you agree with me that if we really had a kind of full toolbox that we could give veterans at the end of their career, if they're interested in getting into business, would that be a good idea? Thank you for the question. Currently, there are a number of different organizations in Canada that provide similar services. There are some that are not present in BC, some that are not in Quebec or Nova Scotia, and there are regional programs, but, that's as far as it goes. I think in Canada, there's an opportunity to centralize a lot of those things in one place. So everybody can come to a single window to find those services. I worked with some companies in Sherbrooke. They're sort of like Invest Ottawa. They're an organization that helps people with technology. But really, it's just like little pockets of services here and there. It's not centralized. So what I'm working on, and what my team is working on, is centralizing this so that we can clearly communicate the opportunities, the mentorship, the list of the CEOs of businesses and so on. And then we'll provide money to help get that going. It can't just be a single high-tech business. It might be a small business or something similar. And we're also a support hub for marketing, HR, and so on. So the idea is to bring all of these different things together, like the Veterans Business Network with Caleb Walker, who's on our board, and all of those other ones, and centralize them, and then inform everyone, not just military bases and dockyards and stations and so on, but also people in rural areas. So up in northern Quebec and places like that. Great. Mr. Blanchard, you talked about a particular percentage of entrepreneurs who deal with a lot of hardship at the beginning. And of course, not all of them succeed in their business ventures. Do you have the percentage of veterans who actually fail, whose startups fail? Today, no, I don't have that. I can try to do that. My goal is to get money. I have a PhD in business. My specialty is entrepreneurship. And so that's what I'm focused on. I started a nonprofit, the Veterans Research Institute, and our goal is to get more information from Canada about businesses. And then there were a whole lot of people who went through the 1-week boot camp, and we don't have statistics on success rates or failure rates. So I would like to start that in Canada so that we can see what the stats are. How many people make it through the first year? Is it 50% because they didn't have money, or because they lacked education, or because they lacked experience? What was the reason? Yeah, absolutely. So that would actually be one of our recommendations, right? To have more traceability, to have this information, and also to get the numbers so that we can see where the weaknesses are and then focus on them. So thank you for that really helpful information. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. And Madame Gaudreau, I'm very glad that I didn't have to cut off Mr. Bouchard this time. Thank you. Now for the second round of questions.
Pearson for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for their service and for being here today. My questions are for Mr. Greywall. We've heard from the government, I was just reading press release from March 26 about the government's plans to spend $500 billion on defense procurement over the next decade. I'm interested in a couple of things. One, are you seeing that a shift in defense procurement? Are you seeing that money coming out in your direction? And secondly, you talked about this northern camp where you do training for us and our allies. So I anticipate that you interact with soldiers from other countries. And which country is doing a good job of that? And how do we get our veterans, because I assume our veterans have a talent pool, battlefield instincts, all these kinds of stuff that warfare is changing, that we can't necessarily just write it out on paper. It's some of this stuff is going to be like, a soldier's going to see something and go like, we need this. And to come to committee and tell us about this, it takes a long time. So have veterans embedded in this whole process would seem to allow us to have some of that instinct. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of address those three areas a little bit.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Short answer, yes. We are starting to see the investment and those dollars, flow down the hill into everything from startups to enterprises, through avenues such as BDC, who do such a good, job of supporting startups writ large, entrepreneurship across the citizenry, just not only veterans. So that money is being deployed and it's starting to move. I think on the veteran context, Buy Canada, we would love to see a buy veteran, right? Show and prove some incentives for working with companies that are veteran-run, veteran-owned, sovereign. I think would be a boon to that economic development question. We often work hand in hand. Frankly, we fought in the same wars, and we do the same training, and then we commiserate and hang out after service as well with all of our Five Eyes and allied friends and former colleagues. There are a number of countries who've invested in this space, and to my point earlier about this being as equally an economic policy as it is a veteran policy. Our friends and partners down to the U.S. have the SBA, the Business Administration, that has a very dedicated avenue and pathways for veterans, capital support immediately through their economic development agency, not through their Veterans Affairs, and then even military spouses have familial avenues to starting businesses and supporting businesses. So that's one highlight I think that we could learn a lot from and implement quickly. As far as numbers from my preparation for this meeting, $1.6 billion has been deployed through that program over the last 20 years. They see a return on investment of almost $1 trillion of economic impact a year from that. So it's a return on investment for the Canadian population, who puts a lot of money, time, and effort into training soldiers, who can then come out and leverage those learnings and that knowledge and that risk-taking, which is a large part of entrepreneurship.
I followed with interest just the war in Ukraine and how quickly the tactics of war have changed, and somehow, in some ways, the very high tech versus very low tech. It's been interesting to see these drone warfare, and we bring back netting and things like that. And these I think that's that battlefield instinct that I was talking about. How now part of it is that you kind of you develop that by experience, but then you enter this private sector, have an idea for a business and things, but some of that can take years to develop. That's more like an R&D kind of area. Do you see the Americans have DARPA? They put out lots of research investment through that. Do you see anything like that happening in Canada, or do you have a recommendation for something like that?
We do. DRDC is a premier global organization, under DND. Could they be more visible? Absolutely. Could they do more to integrate with those soldiers who still maintain the attributes of service after they leave service to serve Canada, which I would count myself as many of my colleagues, who have served also amplify and echo that. So DRDC, DND, ideas, minds, there are a number of avenues to them. They're clunky, they're slow. Today's conversation isn't necessarily about them. But I think Canada is moving in the right direction on that space, and building businesses from that end user lens is going to be an enabler.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grewal. For 5 minutes, Mr. D'Entremont.
Much, Madam Chair, and I think, but you know, I always take home some interesting points when we have these presenters come. What I'm finding super interesting is you know, the things that we make. You know, an entrepreneur can be a whole bunch of different things, but I do like it when people make things. And you know, today we've had T-shirts, we've had you know, blacksmithing, respiratory protection as we go around. So you know, I'm really interested in how does someone get from, you know, a career in the armed forces to looking into entrepreneurship and then build something. So maybe my first question to Mr. Steed quickly is, you know, where does blacksmithing come from? Like where you know, and what kind of products are you making for sale? And thank you for the program that you're doing with other veterans to get them into the business of blacksmithing.
Great question. While I was in the military, I was sent to technical school, fleet school, basically in Halifax. I did an 18-month course there on engineering. There was a machining component. There was hydraulics components, and we did, you know, basically second-year engineering. I was at TQ5 level, but it was an excellent program. It was 18 months long, and I got a lot out of that. When I left the military, I used that training for an apprenticeship in millwrighting, and I was credited with 3 years towards that apprenticeship because of my military experience and training. So that was super helpful. Unfortunately, they've changed that program for my MOC, and they do not offer quite the level that I received when I was in, which is unfortunate. But you know, going forward, the military has its reasons for that. So, and then, so I worked with metal, I worked with steel, I worked in manufacturing for different companies, and really like to see things being built. Started blacksmithing just as a hobby, and started making small items for people. Now, what we do in our shop is we do decorative gates, decorative railings, art pieces, things like this, and a few small items as well. But we've transitioned more to architectural blacksmithing. So some of the stuff we've done is you know, could be larger projects for usually businesses or individuals and home-based projects, things like that. So yeah, we're creating what I like to call functional art. And, you know, I like to make my pieces beautiful when they go out and have the customer very happy.
Well, next time you come out east, I've got a couple blacksmith spots. The Village Historique de la Nouvelle-Écosse would love to have you. Maybe come spend some time showing them how to do some of their work. So I would go to Mr. Grewal for a few moments. You know, you're building some cool products too. You know, as a retired firefighter, you know, putting on a BA is probably not the most fun thing to do in the world. You know, what kind of products are you finding yourself building, or at least you know, accessing or being able to bring to you know, military and first responders?
Great to know that you have some end user experience on that as well. You know, gas masks are great pieces of equipment. SCBAs are great pieces of equipment, but we use them for everything. And you know, there are very unique conditions and environmental and operational scenarios where those are overkill. So you know, the respiratory protection piece is important. The work I do with Burn Pit 360 in the U.S. is important, and bringing that advocacy up here is part of it. So the reason I add that context is I think that's why we build things, right, is to innovate and get better and serve, continue to serve soldiers of the future who are going to benefit from the lessons that we've learned. And so you see a lot of the veteran, you know, groups and business owners working in that direction. We also, as part of IMT Group, build Canada's arsenal of 155 munitions. We're very proud of that. We work closely with other partners to commercialize and get those into the supply chain for the Canadian Armed Forces and our allies. So building those is pretty exciting as well. And being an end user, who've been downrange and receiving fires and then executing fires and then being part of the supply chain to build them is something to other committee members' points about building. So that's a driver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grewal, Mr. D'Entremont. Pour 2 minutes et demie, Madame Gaudreau.
2.5 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. Thank you, Madam Chair. And witnesses, I really want to thank you. You've really given us information that will allow us to generate a lot of recommendations. Now, I really don't have a lot of time, Madam Chair, so I would like to discuss the motion that I gave notice of last March 23rd. I'm hoping that we could debate that motion now because it's a very important subject, as this one is. We had a number of meetings on this subject, received a lot of emails about it, and I'd like us to be able to debate the subject of my motion now. I just came back from the Hospital Saint-Anne recently, where I spoke with a former EX3 from the Armed Forces who had to wait 3 years to get care. And I mean, when he told me what he lived through and how long he had to wait, it was very unfortunate. So I'd like to hear more about this issue. And I think it's sort of like a coin with 2 sides, or actually 3 sides. There's the front face, the back face, and then there's also the thickness of the coin, and we haven't really dealt with that. So this is certainly not a partisan motion. This is one that focuses on the well-being of our veterans. And, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I want to make sure that we really properly study the subject so that we can really help our veterans and make sure that we're on the right path. So, and make any changes that are necessary. So, Ms. Gaudreau, you still had 40 seconds left out of your 2.5 minutes. You're saying that you want to debate the motion. I have 3 witnesses before me at the moment. I'm not sure how much time we have. I think only about 10 minutes left in the meeting. So, out of respect for the witnesses, perhaps we can release them before we open the floor to the motion that you would like to debate. Of course, it's fully within your right to table this motion. So to the witnesses, what I'll say is thank you very much for having been with us today. This concludes your participation in the meeting.
Goodbye to our 3 witnesses. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you were able to contribute today. I really enjoy listening myself. So on this, I will release the 3 of you, and we will, as a member of Parliament, continue to debate Mr. Gaudreau's request on a motion that she brought forward. Merci beaucoup à nos témoins. I will just suspend for a minute and come back in 30 seconds. Yeah, just to say goodbye to Mr. Grewal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Je ne sais pas si Madame Gaudreau, vous voulez continuer.
All right. So, Ms. Gaudreau, I don't know if you wanted to continue or if anyone else wanted to speak.
And then Mr. Casey.
I will keep this brief because I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to pass this motion quickly. I'm supportive of the motion. One small suggestion in terms of an amendment to add to it but certainly have heard a lot of concerns, both in the meetings that we've had and otherwise, that I think need to be explored further. So I'm fully supportive and agree with the motion put forward by Madame Goudreau, but I would just move the following amendment, that in her, she's got a list of witnesses, types of witnesses. I would just add, including the Union of Veterans Affairs employees, as an amendment to that. And that's simply because, obviously, when we studied this previously, when it was first being brought forward, the union itself had expressed a lot of concerns at that time. They seem to still have some concerns. I think it would be important that we hear from them to hear their thoughts around this. So just wanted to add them to that's the amendment, is to add them to the list of potential witnesses.
Donc, we will discuss the amendment proposed by Mr. Richards. Mr. Casey, do you want to speak on the amendment of Mr. Richards?
No.
Anyone would like to discuss the amendment proposed by Mr. Richards? Do I have agreement on the amendment or on division? On division. And now on the main motion, Mr.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the motion before us is here following a motion of November 25th, also brought forward by Ms. Gaudreau. That motion proposed having 3 meetings for this study. There was an amendment made on November 25th, 2025. It was moved by Mr. Richards, and then added to the list of witnesses the minister, and that was adopted. We are now in a position where we will be starting the 4th meeting. I understand that the committee decided to extend the study from 3 meetings to 4, although I don't remember when that happened, but that must have happened. So the motion before us today, I'll speak directly to it. It was tabled, or rather notice was given on March 23rd, 2026. And the first line I think is important. That, in light of the testimony heard during the course of this study. Okay, so March 23rd, the testimony that we had heard, we heard over 2 meetings, on March 21st and March 23rd. But the foundation of this motion, apparently, is the testimony that was heard up to that point. So up to that point, we had heard the testimony of Mr. Carter, Mr. Laidler, Mr. Bernat, and representatives of the WCG, of Veterans Affairs Canada, and LifeMark. That was all of the testimony that we had heard at that point, and that is what this motion is based on. So I would ask the question, what was said in that testimony that required us to double the time allotted for this study? Because apparently that's what this motion is being based on. And the answer to that question is that, there's no reason. Maybe it was in, the written submissions received up to that point, is what I thought. But actually, there were no written submissions received before March 23rd. Okay, so we're here. It's April 13th, and we're debating this motion. Of course, we've heard other testimony since this motion, notice of motion was given, including the Ombudsman's testimony. which said that over the last 3.5 years, 2% of all of the complaints received had been in suspension. That's over the last 3.5 years. And the ombudsperson found 6 examples in those complaints of things that were unjustified. All of those complaints were resolved, and no systematic problems were identified. We had the testimony from the minister, same thing. There were almost no complaints. No complaints from members. So what is the basis for this? I don't think it's the testimony heard during the course of this study, as the motion says. So I'm wondering if we should really be re-traumatizing veterans, the veterans who would be called to testify here. Veterans that we heard from through third parties and who told us through those third parties that they were concerned about having to continually repeat their stories. You know, and then we're asking them to come back here and repeat their stories again. That's really my concern. You know, this motion seems to be based on a problem that doesn't really exist. So I just want to make those comments, put them on the record. I want to be extremely clear that I think that this motion is not justified, that the basis for this motion is not strong. And as you know, I have a problem with, you know, after we've set a schedule, we've made a decision. I don't like it when we change things afterward. And we're back at this point again. It's what we call in English mission creep. Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. So just for all the members of the committee, in the structure of the initial motion, where we had 3 meetings and then 4, so that's in the motion that we had adopted before this debate, there were still 2.5 hours left. That's for the motion that the entire group adopted. Ms. Gaudreau, I see that you have your hand raised. Go ahead. Yes, well, you know, Madam Chair, when we start a study, it's because there's something that we want to investigate. It's because, you know, people have been raising flags. I don't know what you think, but personally, since I was named as a critic for Veterans Affairs, I've had a lot of people raising flags, and I think that we need to investigate things to make sure that things are okay. If things are going well, great. If they're not, we need to take corrective action. And the reason that I tabled this notice of motion on March 23rd is that we're being told things are fine. Okay. If the organizations are telling us that things are going well, you know, that raises another question. And, you know, the people who listened, you know, because, of course, Veterans Affairs is one of the committees that is the most watched by people outside of Parliament, because we're talking about people's lives. So, of course, these people said, when they saw that, when they saw people saying things were going well, they said, hey, what's going on? So it's not about re-traumatizing people. The goal is not to harm them. Quite the contrary. The goal is to have professionals, you know, union representatives, researchers, academics come in and give us more information on this study. Because currently, if you gather together all of the testimony and table the study, well, not only has a lot changed since March 23rd, but it would mean that we're not really hearing the whole truth. So for me, you know, there were still some organizations that I think we should meet with. Because, you know, if these organizations had said, look, here are the things that we're not doing well, here are the weaknesses, here's what we want to fix, you know, it wouldn't be the same situation where everyone's saying things are fine. You know, every single day, veterans call me to raise flags. I don't know if that's the case for you, but certainly it is for me. So, you know, a lot of things are changing in the world, not just politics. I certainly don't think I'm going to take any lessons from my colleagues. I don't want this to be partisan. I don't want people to try and use politics to protect or cover up anything. You know, all I'm proposing is 3 new meetings so that we hear from the people we haven't heard from yet, so that we can properly conclude the study and make sure that everyone has been heard from.
Monsieur Casey.
Mr. Casey.
I want to request something. So now we're at,
we're prepared to pass it on to Vision.
Yeah.
As amended.
So just to make sure, I think I'm hearing through the spirit of collaboration that members are willing, and that's not for me to preamble, but I hear that we are willing to accept the motion on division. Is that agreed upon? Excellent. On this, I will adjourn. Merci.